Welcome to this free immigration help channel. In this video we will talk about yet again family immigration petition I-130. Petition for alien relatives, specifically whenever it comes to the financial aspect of it. Being a sponsor, yes, simply put, how much money do you need in order to become a successful sponsor, in order to qualify as a sponsor and not have any questions, unnecessary questions from NVC, from the Department of State. So before I begin, as always, I'm going to mention I am not an immigration attorney. This is not a legal advice. All the information that I provide in my videos on this channel is directly from official government sources, and in this case we're going to use both the Department of State, as you guys can see I have it open in front of me, their FAQ page, and also USCIS.gov, which is US Citizenship and Immigration Services official government website. As always, if you have any questions along the way, do not hesitate to ask them in the comments below. So far I have been doing every day because I get a lot of questions. In fact, there will be a video coming up in about an hour, about 55 minutes, answering your question, going through the comments and answering your questions. So if you are interested to hear an answer to your question, make sure to subscribe in order not to miss that. Okay, so let's get into the question: how much money do you need in order to be a sponsor, in order to qualify as a sponsor on I-130 petition? And briefly, I'm going to describe the process. If you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, depending on which one you are, you can invite certain relatives, children, spouses for both, and then you can invite your parents and your siblings if you are a U.S. citizen. Alright, so you start the process with USCIS by submitting the I-130 petition for alien relative. Once the case with USCIS is approved, it is then transferred to the NVC. And once it is transferred to the NVC, which is National Visa Center, that's where all of the financial stuff begins to happen, where you submit the affidavit of support, amongst many other things. And of course your financial documents, your tax returns, your 1099s, W-2s, whatever you receive. Basically, trying to establish that you have enough money in order to sponsor the relative that you are petitioning for. Now, if you look through the, official government sources, if you read through the FAQ, things might seem, let's just say, a little bit vague. You know, they're talking about the poverty guidelines, federal poverty guidelines. As long as you're a certain percentage above the poverty guidelines, you can. With all of that being said, with all of this being written out on the official government websites, it still is a lot of times unclear to a lot of people. So hopefully with this video I can make it as clear as possible. And for that we're going to go directly to the HHS poverty guidelines for affidavits of support, which you can find on US Citizenship and Immigration Services website. I will put this link in the description below so you can just click for it. So there's certain requirements for 48 states, and then there's for 2 states, for Alaska and for Hawaii. There's a little bit of a little bit higher up, but we will talk about the 48 states. If Alaska or Hawaii applies to you, then obviously you can take a look at that. So the first thing you're gonna notice here on this little table is there are a few columns. There's a sponsor's household size, all right, and you would probably wonder why it starts at number 2, right? At 2 household size. Why it doesn't start at 1? But I'll explain that in just a moment. Just stick around. And then there's 100% of HHS poverty guidelines, which applies only to those who are active duty military. All right. So if you are active duty military, then you don't need to show as much of an income. It's not really a big difference, as you can see. Only about $5,000 in income, total income, household size. And then for everybody else who is not an active duty military, it's 125% of HHS poverty guidelines. Okay, so let's start talking about, we're gonna concentrate on this column right here. Again, if you're active duty military, this is what you will be looking at, but we will, for the purpose of this video, we will stick to this one. So let me answer the question why the household size starts at 2. And that's, if you understand that, it kind of already becomes a little bit easier. And the reason why it starts at 2 is because this table assumes that even if you're just one person yourself, right, by yourself, you live by yourself, When you are inviting another one person, let's say your husband inviting a spouse, or your wife, right? So you're inviting a spouse. That is already two. So, interestingly, and if you read through the FAQ, you will be able to pick up that information. They count the person that you are petitioning for as part of your household size already by default. So if you're just one person living all by yourself, right? Let's say you're married, but your wife is abroad, or your husband is abroad, doesn't matter, spouse. And you're living here in the United States by yourself, and you're LPR or US citizen, and you're petitioning for the spouse. They already assume the household size of two. That is why it starts from 24,650 and not with the household size of one. So with that being said, if you live by yourself, if you don't file your taxes for yourself, and you have dependents, you have kids, you have somebody who lives in you, with you, immigrant here as well, I can definitely relate. So if you're all by yourself, right, just by yourself, and you're petitioning for someone, doesn't matter who, for one person you're petitioning for, that is already a household size of two, and you will have to show a minimum of this amount, and then for these two states a little bit more, but you get the point. This amount right here for a household of two, and I think that's one of the main problems that creates a lot of confusion whenever it comes to establishing what amount of income you need to show. Because if you take, for example, let's say there's a father with two kids, right? So it's a household of three people, right? So the father is filing the taxes, and he includes his two children who are under the age of 18. He includes them on the taxes, and he files the taxes with two dependents, basically, a household of three. Now, this father is a US citizen, and he's inviting both of his parents, mother and father, all right? So you would think, you look at the household of three, and you say, okay, well, for him, 31,000 should be enough in order to invite two of his parents. Wrong. That is not correct, because once you account for two additional basically beneficiaries on this case, not additional, but two beneficiaries on this case, they are added to an existing household size. So now the household size is 5. It becomes 5, and so the correct number would be 43,925. So as you can see, that is a pretty big difference. That's over 12. My math is not fantastic, so I apologize for that, but somewhere around $12,000 additional that you need to show. Now, another very, very important thing that I wanted to mention here, in order to make it clear, if you are making a W-2 income, obviously the income that they're going to be looking at it is a net income, right? So the income that is all after all the taxes and all that good stuff. But a lot of times people, they are receiving 1099, they're self-employed, they have their own business, and that's where situation gets a little bit more complicated whenever it comes specifically to this kind of stuff, whenever it comes to the affidavit of support. Because somebody who is whose business is making $100,000 a year in gross income, right? So there's $100,000 coming in, and then obviously when they file taxes, they're showing expenses here, stuff that they bought for their business there, and all in all, once you take out all of these expenses out of that gross income, now you have the net income, which comes down to, say, for example, $40,000. So you show $60,000 in expenses. And a lot of times, I know if you're not directly dealing with business and being self-employed, even just a freelancer or anything like this, it might seem a little bit kind of like outrageous, like, wow, 100,000. You make $100,000 a year, and then you end up basically showing only 40,000. How does it work? And a lot of times you see it once you actually start getting into the business aspect of it, because literally anything you buy for your business, you are kind of almost incentivized to write it off on taxes. Why? Because, well, if you write it off, now you have to pay taxes not on $100,000 but on $40,000. So you're actually saving money at the end of the year, not in the end of the year, but the beginning of the new year for the past tax year. All right. So again, a lot of times people confuse it and they say, well, I make a really good income and this is poverty guidelines. I definitely cover that. But once you look at their tax returns and you look at the net income after all of the expenses are taken out of it, then you're like, well, not exactly. You can't really, you will in your situation have to get, you know, depending on how many people you're petitioning for, depending on your household size, you will have to find a joint sponsor. So hopefully this is clear. One more thing that I'm going to briefly mention in this video, because I did get a few questions about it, specifically about the assets. And whenever it comes to the assets, yes, you can replace your income with assets. And I'm going to put, again, this link. This is a FAQ for specifically for whenever it comes to the sponsorship with the NVC, the affidavit of support. I will put this so you can kind of have it as a reference just in case. But if you look at the assets, they actually have very, very specific number. So here we go, the total net value of assets less liens. So meaning you take out all the liabilities. So let's say, for example, you own a house, right? And there's a mortgage on it. The house, let's say, is worth $200,000, but there is still $100,000 mortgage on it. So you have to take the full amount and then minus all the liabilities. And minus all the liabilities, in this case, is going to be left with $100,000. So in this case, the assets is $100,000. All right. Rough example, and I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, but if you have any additional questions along the way, just drop them in the comments below, and I will definitely make sure to address them. But the total net value of assets less liens and liabilities against them must equal 5 times the difference between the sponsor's income and 125 of the poverty level for the household size. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of times, you know, I have people saying, hey, you know, I'm making good money. I am self-employed. My business is making a lot of money and I have some assets and I still didn't qualify. And actually very recently, just a few months ago, I had a case where this guy is doing good money and he lives by himself, and he was inviting both of his parents, and the NVC, basically they reviewed his financial information and they came back and they said, you don't make enough money. So he had to actually find a joint sponsor in order to be able to do it. And from just briefly looking at the case and the numbers, it seemed kind of outrageous because it really does look like a great income and the guy has assets and he lives by himself. But once you dig really deep into it, you take out all the expenses from the business that are filed on the taxes. You take out all the liabilities from the assets, and then you also look at the tax information of how many dependents does he add, and he was actually adding 2 dependents to his tax returns, and then he was inviting 2, so 3 already plus 2, 5. So he had 5 total household because he already had 3, right, household size, and then he was inviting 2 parents, so that's a 5. So he had to show 43,900. And on his tax returns, basically, once you remove all the expenses, it was coming down to like $30-something thousand, even though the gross income was really good. But with all the expenses, it came down really low, and he just did not qualify as a sponsor. So it's not as much a math problem, and if you've been subscribed to this channel, you already know that how I'm not good with math, but more so understanding of how it is calculated. And if you can figure it out, you can pretty easily navigate with that. But again, like I said, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask them in the comments below, and I will be happy to address them. So I really hope this video was helpful. All the links you can find in the description below. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to address them. Thank you very much for watching. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.